Good morning, everyone. This is Stewart Carroll with Beck Technology. Thanks for joining me this morning. I'm joined for this episode of Estimating Life with the Beck Group by Brent Pilgrim. Just for clarification, Brent has run into some power issues at his office, and we're only going to be doing audio today. But Brent, thank you very much for agreeing to spend the next 20 to 30 minutes with me.
Yeah, hey, you're welcome. Glad to be a part of it.
For those that don't know, Brent and I actually spent almost 10 years working together at Beck Technology. Brent has actually worked with both our sister company, the Beck Group, and at Beck Tech. So Brent, just to start out, maybe you can tell the audience a little bit of your journey and maybe explain the differences between the Beck Group and Beck Technology.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. I started my career with Beck in 2001 right out of school, and I've always been really interested and passionate about the integration efforts that Beck has really been focused on, and changing the way the industry works or approaches construction and design. So I started there and met you about, 2004 or 5. I remember going to lunch with you and talking about the cool stuff you guys were doing with DESTINI. At that time, DESTINI Profiler. You remember that?
I do remember that. I had hair and it wasn't gray. I remember like it was just yesterday. It's scary.
I know I didn't have near as much gray as I do today. So, but I don't know, maybe about 2007 or 2008, I had an opportunity to take Profiler out to the marketplace through Beck Technology and offer consulting services. And to me, that provided an opportunity to evangelize about, what we could be doing with conceptual estimating or even 5D estimating, if you want to call it that, with an early design model. And I got to interact with a lot of different design firms and construction firms and show the market what was possible at that time. So that was very interesting to me. And I felt like, although at the time it felt like a little bit of a deviation from my, the career path that I had signed up for, it felt like the right thing to do. And then about 2015, 2016, the Beck Group decided to bring Estimator onto their platform for estimating, and I wanted to be a part of that process of training and teaching our people how to use Estimator. So that's how I kind of started with Beck, moved over to Beck Technology for a while, and then ended up being back over at Beck. For some background on Beck, we have 6 regional offices across the country, plus an international office in Mexico City. And the way we're structured, we have design and construction in each of those offices with individual pre-con leadership in each of those offices as well. So each regional office is fairly well self-supported. The organization itself has grown from about 600, 800 million in volume, back in around 2008, around the recession time period. Mm-hmm. And now we're around maybe 1.2 billion, something around that number. So we've grown tremendously, and both in volume in terms of construction volume and design volume, but also in terms of people and resources and that kind of thing. So,
awesome.
What else would you want to know about that?
No, I think that's great. So you rejoined Beck in 2016 after the decision was made to implement our solution, DESTINI Estimator, and we'll kind of get into a little bit more of the details around how did that happen. But maybe just to frame the conversation, could you talk a little bit about the pre-construction technology environment prior to the decision to move forward with Estimator?
Sure. Yeah, we have been so I mentioned earlier, we have each regional office has their own pre-con leadership, but as a whole, as an organization, we were a timberline shop for probably 10 plus years. Before that, we were MC squared. And then of course, just like any other contractor out there, Excel was a big component of our estimating team's toolkit, if you want to call it that. We had about, so overall, we have about 40 estimators across those regional offices. And as part of our timberline implementation, we had developed maybe 275 to 300 assemblies that were either developed in-house or developed through the help of external consulting services or something like that. And so, we had a fairly robust database, greater than 15,000 line items, 275 assemblies. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we were operating with there from a data standpoint.
Mm-hmm. And then beyond just Timberline, what were you doing for 2D, and what were you doing for model-based estimate, 5D, your passion?
Yeah.
What was the environment like?
Yeah, good question. So aside from Timberline and Excel, we used on-screen takeoffs for all of our 2D quantification. For a while there, we were early adopters of the old Innovia product that came and has kind of come and gone, really. You don't hear much about it anymore, but we had some users that were early adopters of that platform. In 2004, the firm, as a design firm, we adopted Revit. And so that came on board pretty early. And of course, we used Profiler from its inception at various stages of implementation. I like to, when I'm explaining this, I do like to tell people, our level of implementation kind of looked like a hill and valley type of a map, depending on who was working with us and what skill sets they had. Reflected a little bit about how strongly we were implementing Profiler at any given time across those regional offices. So, but I guess the final thing to say on structure is that we have historically been somewhat decentralized. The Dallas office is the headquarters office and is pointed to maybe as the lead office, if you will. But each regional office has its own leadership, and from a process and procedure standpoint, we were as standardized as any firm could be that had regional offices, but they also had a lot of freedom, if you want to call it that, to implement their own innovative practices and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So with that regional autonomy, I mean, I'm assuming that caused some challenges that went into the decision to change pre-construction platforms. What were some of both those regional challenges and more globally just challenges in general that made Beck switch? I mean, Brent, I know you and I know this story, but for those that don't, there was some really strong supporters of Timberline that had used it for a long time. And, Beck was not the first adopter of Estimator by any stretch of the imagination. Right. So what were some of the circumstances, some of the challenges that Beck leadership was hoping to address with the switch?
Yeah, that's a good point too. We did have some strong Timberline advocates, people that had invested a lot of their own careers in the development of Timberline. And to be fair and honest, Timberline served us very well for the last, whatever that time period was, 10 plus years. It was a good platform and it served us well. But as we were looking, interestingly, we had a little bit of a change in leadership around 2000. I'm probably going to get this date wrong, but let's just say it was 2014, with the new pre-con leadership in the Dallas office who was a strong advocate of Profiler, was a user himself, a super user of Profiler himself. And so just together, in terms of pre-con leadership and our pre-con makeup, we've got a really strong team that is diverse in experience and talent, or not talent. We've got great talent, but diverse in terms of different experiences in market sectors and technology use. But one thing that I would love to brag on our team about is that they are open to looking at the new technologies. And for the most part, we're a fairly technology savvy group. Mm-hmm. Now that comes with, obviously, not everybody is, and some people need more training than others and all that kind of stuff. We can get into that here in a minute. But in terms of the reasons as to why we decided to look to Estimator and change from Timberline, was a lot of that was dependent on the leadership of the team at that point in time at Beck. A lot of it was looking down and as an integrated firm that does integrated work with our design and construction groups, we were looking at a new era of pre-construction, really. How is the pre-construction industry going to change to respond to more integrated volume? And so as we looked at our toolkit, how could we position ourselves from a technology standpoint to better capitalize on integrated type of work? And then at the end of the day too, it made sense we do a lot of target value design workflow process. And so from that standpoint, it makes sense as well. So I would call those soft reasons. Mm-hmm. There were certainly maybe practical reasons that are probably obvious, but let's talk about those too as well. Since we were profiler users, there was this continuity that Estimator provided. One of our biggest pushbacks internally, or not pushbacks, but challenges, roadblocks, was we developed this estimate in Profiler, and then we'd have to recreate it in the Timberline. And so the continuity that Estimator provided, or I should just say the DESTINI suite provided, from conceptual estimates, schematic estimates down into DD and CD level estimating, it just made sense. That was a very practical reason. Because Estimator incorporates the 2D and 3D quantity takeoff, there was an ability to consolidate our software cost, going from multiple softwares down to one, obviously is a cost savings and makes sense there. One of the things I've seen recently, and it's proven out recently, but it was one of our early assumptions, was that our project management staff, the construction management staff that are out on projects, would be able to quickly pick up Estimator and use it to throw together some change order estimates and to manage their estimates a little bit more easily than maybe Timberline had been. Timberline was not something that people out on the job sites just picked up and started using. Excel was their platform of choice. And here recently, I've done, since we started implementation, I've done a lot of training with our construction management staff, and I am seeing some adoption of it out on job sites as an estimating tool, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah.
So I mean, in summary, more efficient workflows, the ability to integrate the model or 2D or 2D takeoff with the estimate, so that you'd have visual communication. Is that kind of the big one for Beck, being that they do a lot of integrated project work between design and construction?
Yeah, that's certainly our vision and our roadmap, and we're in varying degrees of implementation there, certainly. And I can talk more about where we're at in that later in the discussion, but certainly that paints the vision and the roadmap for where we want to take our technology and how it integrates with our firm and our internal workflows.
Okay. So you mentioned the change in leadership within Precon. I imagine it wasn't just Jeff Radcliffe or whoever was that responsible saying we're going to do it. That was selling above the head of Precon. So what did that look like, and how long did that take?
Yeah, so Jeff obviously was the if you want to call it, the thought leader in that change, and definitely was the motivating factor behind us being able to make that change. Because I think I talked about this in one of our previous webinars, which is, do you change from the bottom up or from the top down? And that's a discussion that people have all the time when it comes to change management, and it's an important discussion to have. But what I've learned, I feel, at least for us, is it's got to be a both. You can certainly enable your people to go innovate and do things on their own, but making that something that gets spread across the organization is a challenge if it's only from the bottom up.
Yeah.
That burden of evangelism falls onto that person or those individuals who are the innovators. Whereas if you have someone in leadership who's also pushing from the top down and saying, look, this works, it makes sense, it fits our vision, it enables us to accomplish our goals, and I'm going to partner with those people who are innovating. We're going to work this from both directions. So that's, in a really big picture nutshell, that's it. That's how we did it. But from a more tactical standpoint, certainly there was, I went and met with the Precon leadership in each office. We had an implementation plan that described how we were going to methodically roll this out, and it wasn't just going to be a turn off the switch on Timberline and turn on the switch on Estimator. There was a process that we followed, that I proposed, and we ended up following. There was a training schedule that made this process more palatable. My goal as the implementer was not to lose people or lose productivity in the transition, but basically be able to roll this out to where I can, when you're ready to take on Estimator, I can make the switch, and you can have as little downtime as possible. So, and that goes into how we actually went into implementation. But
so last question on the selling it internally. I know from personal experience when I'm out with prospects, it comes up a lot in relation to the Beck Group adopting this. So, we have a common name in both our company names, the Beck Group and Beck Tech. Peter Beck is our chairman. Why, in your opinion, did this not just happen overnight as soon as we came up with, this product? I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot of head scratching. Wasn't it just an easy gig? Obviously, I went through the whole negotiation. I know that wasn't the case, but maybe share with the group maybe a little insight into how Peter operates.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty and the curse of Beck, and that's one reason why I love Beck so much, and another reason why I get frustrated internally with why aren't we doing things faster, right? I mean, anybody who's passionate about something wants it to happen now and immediately, and you ask the very question, well, why can't we just do this,
Yep.
And that's Peter's style. Is he wants a lot of innovation to come from the ground up. He wants the people in the firm that do the work to be excited about a change because it makes sense, because it fits their personal visions of, I want to be better. I want to make this process better. I want to change the industry because it makes sense. So that's just his style. He leaves that up to, what's that?
He wants buy-in.
He wants buy-in. Yeah, he wants buy-in. He wants people to be excited about the change, because certainly you can do change management from the top down only, but that's going to have varying levels of success, right?
Yeah, agreed. Well, thanks. Let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk about the decision was made. How did you go about implementing Estimator? There's obviously the physical, training and all of that. There's change management, there's data, there's reports. Talk to the audience a little bit about what you did. What was the journey from your legacy system over to Estimator?
Yep. So late 2015, very late, Q4 of 2015, after the decision had been made, we started the evangelism process. We have a national pre-con meeting once a month, and we presented the plan to the group that after it had been thought out and pretty well detailed. We said, look, we're going to have an implementation year, which is 2017. We're going to start in Office X in Q1 and do training for the people in that office, and then move to the next office in the next quarter, and so forth and so on. I think in Q3 we ended up doing 2 offices just because of the office size and whatnot. But we presented the plan. I made it clear that my goal was to, again, kind of replace like-for-like functionality. You can create estimates in Timberline, therefore I want you to just be able to create. I want to make sure you can create and manage your estimates in Estimator when we're done. As you know, Stewart, Estimator has a lot of functionality in it, and our goal was never to, training is drinking from a fire hose as it is, so our goal was never to try to train everybody on all the functionality that existed. In fact, not to jump too far ahead, but that was our goal this year, was to try to expand on the functionality and get more leverage from the application. But in 2017, we had a phased training plan that went regional office by regional office. If someone wasn't ready to participate in that training because they had just started a big job and they were in the legacy system, then we came back and picked them up, later on. But that didn't really happen on large scale. For the most part, offices transitioned in whole, not in part. So that worked out well. I, as the trainer, went to each of the offices. We conducted a 2-day. Really, we had broken it down into 2 half days so that they weren't taking too much time away from their day jobs. And the functionality that we trained on was very kind of the entry-level stuff. It was estimate creation, estimate and data management. We did get into 2D quantity takeoff, although I had some lessons learned there that I would do differently. And then we did assembly training. In parallel to the training, we were migrating our Timberline data over, so we ended up with very similar content from a line item standpoint in Estimator. So that, from a change management standpoint, that helped because people weren't looking at brand new data. They were looking at data they were very familiar with.
Yep.
And then reports, we had a standard report that looked and felt much like our profiler reports. There wasn't much there, but we did have it on our roadmap to take a path of upgrading our report, going back through our own internal corporate branding office and making sure that we had a standardized refresh on our standard report. And so we did that. That took a little bit longer than we had hoped, but those aren't easy projects. And so we got that out. And let's see, what else am I missing? Yeah, that's basically the implementation plan at a high level. We ended up once 2017 was complete, we had trained all the offices, and with the exception of a few, maybe even just a couple of projects that were legacy projects in Timberline, everybody was creating new projects in Estimator. And so when 2018 came around this year, we tried to focus on expanding how we were leveraging the new functionality. You know, that included 3D quantity takeoff, but we're still just scratching the surface there. In fact, we're really more in a pilot mode on 3D QTO because that's a dramatic industry shift in terms of model data in and quality data out, that kind of thing.
So that was really good. I mean, we see it a lot. The phased approach becomes very practical. I thought your unique approach to training by serving up bite-sized chunks was pretty innovative. What are some other lessons learned that maybe you can share around training? And maybe you can even touch a little bit on change management, because I imagine it's kind of factored into.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing is training is perishable. No matter how easy to use the application is, if you've got someone who's going to take training today, but they're not going to actually be able to put that into practice for another month or two, it's not worth their time to go. It's not worth their time or your time to go through training. So I think you have to set a reasonable expectation with the users and with the leadership of those users that when we commit to training, we're committing to using this product.
Yeah.
And so that didn't happen perfectly. Obviously, it's not going to happen perfectly for anywhere. We had some people that fell off and had to come back and go through a second training later on for the reasons that they went out to a different job and weren't even involved in estimating maybe or something to that effect. So training's perishable. That's the first thing everyone should know. So factor that into your training plan. When you've got a diverse background in terms of, we had MC squared users, we had Timberline users, we had Excel users, I think it does make sense to make sure that at a base level, you can replace like-for-like functionality. And that was one of the decisions that I should have mentioned that early on into why we decided to make the change when we did, because Estimator had at that point, I could create and manage estimates just as easily or better actually in Estimator than I could in Timberline. So I didn't feel like I was hurting someone's ability to do their job by migrating platforms, if you want to think of it that way. And I guess another lesson learned would be that estimating is somewhat personal. So when you're going into trying to standardize a process that everyone has their own way of doing things, you got to allow some leeway for that. And I think Estimator does that just naturally. Yes, there's some standardized processes in Estimator or ways of doing things, but it also is a very flexible platform. So that's been good. We also conducted, in 2017, we conducted weekly user group meetings. So every Friday at, I think it was 8:30 in the morning last year, we had just a 30-minute touchdown. So anybody that had gone through the training or was about to go through the training or was just interested in kind of tagging along until they took the training, logged into a GoToMeeting. We conducted a little discussion about, hey, what's going on? Where are we at with the implementation? What are the lessons learned that people are experiencing? Maybe we've learned something differently than how I've trained it a better way, perhaps, or something to that effect. And just kind of shared that journey with everyone. And that helped to give confidence to those who hadn't yet participated in the training that, yes, we were making progress. We were going to get to them, and they were going to be able to get up and running when we got to them. In 2018, we flipped that and went to an every other week meeting. And we actually haven't met every other week, as it turned out, throughout the year, just because there wasn't as much to talk about. But I think that having that touchdown with the team and giving them an ability to communicate with each other what they've learned is important, or was important, and kind of helps with the change management aspect of it, the resistance to change. From a leadership standpoint, so can I throw one more thing in there?
Yeah, you bet.
From a leadership standpoint, I also developed a monthly progress report and presented that as an option or an opportunity to communicate with leadership about where we were. And you can't make everybody read those, but I at least provided those and submitted those to have those who were interested in monitoring our progress see where we were at any given time during the year.
Yeah, I think another thing, again, outside looking in, and you're not alone in this, but I do attribute this to the successful deployment of our tech across the board, is when you have somebody in a position like yourself who is the spearhead. You are the tip of the spear, making sure that everybody is aware of where the company is and that you're keeping everybody accountable to showing up to those 30-minute huddles, that you're sharing lessons learned across the organization. I think that was a big contributor. Having, this wasn't the only thing that you were doing, but it was a large portion of what you were doing to make sure that this was successful.
Yeah, you're touching on something I shouldn't have glossed over quite as easily, because it is part of my job. When I describe my job, my role to people, I tell them I'm a third and a third and a third. A third of my job is supporting the DESTINI implementation, and that includes anything from answering a call from a guy in Atlanta about how to do X, Y, and Z to helping IT with the deployment of new versions and managing the database and everything. So that's, it fluctuates month to month, but generally speaking, a third of my year is allocated to supporting the group. And that's a commitment from leadership that has been made, and a great decision. And I would advocate that for anybody. You've got to have a dedicated person. Now this year, I'm actually trying to push for more resources to help in this, because management of data and that kind of thing is so important and requires dedicated leadership. So if anything I've learned is yes, we did the right thing by allocating time for me to be dedicated to this and making that commitment. But the lesson I've learned is that there needs to be more of that. So
awesome. Well, Brent, we're coming up on the 30-minute window that we set aside. Are there any closing comments, remarks, experiences, whether that be on projects or use of the tech and deployment, that we haven't covered that you want to share?
Yeah, maybe one last thing that might be of interest to people is, pre-construction or our estimators, maybe more generally speaking, are a unique bunch, and I mean that positively. We've got very conservative type personality types, and we've got more risk taker personality types. Depending on your organization, you may have more or less of one of those groups. But one thing I've grown to appreciate at Beck and in our pre-construction team specifically is that we've got a balance. We've got a good balance of both of those. You need people who aren't afraid to go out there and push the tech, even if it's not quite ready yet, maybe for something like 3D quantity takeoff, right? We've got a group that's out there on the early adoption front, working hard to try to figure out, can we define workflows and best practices and create some rigor around this process such that we can get consistent information and get accurate information. And you need people who are comfortable being out there on that ledge. At the same time, you need some conservative folks back at the shop that are focused on producing quality, accurate information, and not letting that other group get too far out over their skis and being too much of a risk taker. But you've got to push the envelope with the technology. Otherwise, you'll just kind of stay where you're at. And that's a huge variable in terms of growing your capabilities with the application.
Well, that's awesome. Brent, thank you very much for being willing to share your experiences and thoughts with us today.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was fun.
You're welcome anytime. So for next month's Estimating Life, we're going to have an interview with Andy Leake of the PARIC organization. It's on December the 19th at 10 a.m. Central Time. We'll be sending out invites to attend that webinar. Hopefully we won't have power outage issues and we'll be able to share video. Thanks again, Brent. Thanks again, everybody else online for sharing, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Stewart.
You're welcome.